Welcome to The Road. This is a weekly podcast of All Saints Lutheran Church. I'm your host, John Pedersen, and I serve as pastor. Each week, we reflect on faith, life, and navigating the road ahead. The language of journey is common when we think about life. It has its joys and challenges along the way, and we all need a little encouragement and guidance at times to keep us going. There's a word in the Bible, asphalia, which means truth, but it's the same root word we use in English for asphalt, if you can believe that. It's a solid surface that makes travel easier and more assured. And so every week we're going to be exploring elements of faith and life that keep us on the road. Faith isn't about living a perfect life. It's about finding our way, getting through rough spots, but seeking out those great vistas too. You can find my weekly message here, but you'll also find special conversations with guests who have insights on things like wellness, parenting, and living with unique purpose. If you appreciate this podcast, remember to subscribe where possible and share it with a friend. Here's this week's message. Brene Brown is an author, professor, and researcher, and tells the story of a conversation that she had with a private pilot years ago. He said, when you first get your pilot's license, it's amazing. You're in a two-seater plane, and you take off, and if the wind blows hard, the plane moves. And if you throttle down, you can feel it in your stomach. You're in a plane that has been built at human scale. It goes fast, but not super fast. But you get bored with that after a while. And so you upgrade to jets. And when you fly a jet, you can't feel anything anymore. It's not built to human scale. It's going beyond human scale fast. And now you're not in the moment. Now you're thinking ahead 30 seconds or a minute. You can't be in the moment because if you do, you die. You can't adapt quickly enough. You can crash into something. You have to think way out ahead. So you disembody. Brown's point about herself in her own life and in our collective life today is that we're disembodied. We're not tethered, we're not grounded, we're being swept away by change. Social media, the AI revolution, and organizations trying to anticipate what's coming next so they can survive. Divisive elections and politics, violence and tragedy all over the world, and general uncertainty about what's coming next is the kind of change that she's talking about. She referenced a conversation in which someone commented to her about social media. I have 1,000 friends, but no one to feed my cat. We're meant to be in community that is grounded and relational. Social media is amazing in many ways, but it doesn't really deliver on that part of human community and interaction. And Brown's point about everything we're experiencing is that increasingly we live in a world that is moving beyond human scale, beyond what we may even be neurologically capable of dealing with, unless we stay tethered and embodied through all of it. When we talk about wellness at All Saints, it's an invitation to stay embodied and tethered to what matters in everything we're seeing and experiencing in the world, but also just in our own lives. You can go to the Be Well tab on our website and click on Spiritual Wellness, and you'll find suggestions for prayer and meditation apps there. If we're going to try to faithfully navigate life today, it helps to form spiritual and emotional practices that allow us to do that well. In today's reading from Acts chapter 2, we heard the story of Pentecost, and it's about the coming of the Spirit and the mission of the church. And suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. That's the first sensory description of the Spirit in the story, wind. And you can probably bring to mind a time when you've stood in the middle of a windstorm. Ever been nudged off your feet a bit? Had to work to keep your balance? The word for spirit in Hebrew is ruach. It can also be translated wind or breath. The Greek word for spirit is similar, pneuma, also translated wind or air in motion. A lot of times the story of Pentecost focuses on the image of flames, but today I want to pay more attention to wind. The image of flying And feeling the wind reminds me also of sailing. It's been years since I've been sailing, but it's something you don't forget. Most of the time when you're on a boat these days, it's powered. You have the rumble and whir of an engine behind you. And you point somewhere, you go. Simple as that. When you're powered by wind, if there is wind, you have to tack back and forth. You don't travel in a straight line all the time. Depending on the wind, you may even need to move further away from your destination at times to position yourselves to finally get to your destination. Most of us are too impatient and accustomed to the control that comes with an engine to appreciate sailing. It takes patience. You have to watch boats cruising by you. You bob around in their wakes, and you ask, why are we in this boat again? Sailboats are still transportation, but now they're more about the experience, about the challenge and really feeling it all again, being connected to the wind and the water and the elements. That sense of connection is more important than ever. You hear the water lapping up against the boat. You can feel the gusts. If you don't align yourself with the wind, the sail flutters and you lose what's propelling you. If you push it too far in a strong wind, you can end up capsized. Every time you turn a sailboat, you need to intentionally engage your body and move to come about. Sometimes you have to duck or you get whacked in the head as the sail flips to the other side. Even though you're on water, it's a very grounded and tethering experience. A ship on the ocean with a cross for a sail is the logo of the World Council of Churches. Images of sailing ships have been used to express the mission of the church from the very earliest years. Symbols have been found in ancient Christian catacombs. And it's not only because the disciples and Jesus spent time on the Sea of Galilee, but because it expresses where we're supposed to draw our energy and power from. It's from Ruach, spirit, wind, breath. Jesus spoke to the disciples about the coming of the Spirit. When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all the truth, for he will not speak on his own, but will speak whatever he hears, and he will declare to you the things that are to come. The Spirit, by that description, is not off on its own, detached from God, but the Spirit is God's presence with us. The Spirit of truth is connected to the Word of God, to Jesus. Not long before this, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The Spirit simultaneously grounds us in that truth while moving us. And being grounded doesn't mean being stagnant. Being a church and a Christian isn't as much about clinging to unchanging teachings and practices as it is being moved and led by the Spirit and continuing to be inspired by the words and life of Jesus along the way. Being a Christian and being a community of faith is a lifelong adventure. So, Sydney, Elsie, and Rylan, that's what embracing faith and mission is really about for you today. It's as exciting as you will allow it to be. It's as exciting, really, as all of us will allow it to be. Faith is not about trying to freeze some moment in time like Peter wanted to do on the mountain during the Transfiguration when Jesus was aglow. It's not about trying to contain it, but instead it's embracing each new day and discerning where the Spirit is leading us now, watching the sails either fill up or flutter. More often than we'd like, it can mean being patient and waiting for the wind to come and move us where we need to go. But when we're connected to the wind, whether on water or in air, the Spirit helps us see how what Jesus taught can be embodied in new and faithful ways today in our time. Even if the disciples and the first Christians who painted ships on the walls of catacombs could never have imagined jets or social media or any of our modern realities. Like I spoke about last week, being connected to the Spirit means Peter embracing people who didn't previously fit his picture of what it meant to be faithful and holy. Today, following the Spirit means that we extend God's love to every neighbor and embrace and welcome all who are drawn to the words and life of Jesus. The Spirit brings people together across differences. The story of Pentecost provides us a picture of that kind of unity, even across what makes us unique. Acts 2 says, there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem, and at this sound of rushing wind, the crowd gathered and was bewildered because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each. Amazed and astonished, they asked, are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear, each of us, in our own native language? People were being drawn together. At a time when we're more likely to see what divides us, how do you think the Spirit is working to bring unity? Where do you sense the Spirit is moving you today? If you pause and slow down so you can feel the wind blowing against your skin, what is it that stirs you? If you pause to pray, to reflect, to meditate, what are you noticing? And how can you and we together discern what that means for our life together, our mission together? To return to an earlier image, maybe it helps us to go back to flying a 2-seater propeller plane again, or to go out on a sailboat, to become embodied again in a world that can feel like we're breaking the sound barrier, unable to hear one another, or connect our observation of events with regular time. But that doesn't mean we can't think and plan ahead as well. We may need to power ourselves and one another to new places in mission, to meet the needs of our neighbors and make the best life we can for ourselves and others. But it does require us to find ways to recollect and tether ourselves through all of it, to return to the Spirit, to the words of Jesus, which have a way of bringing new insight in every age if we open our hearts and minds to them. To do that effectively as people of faith, we may need to listen together and reflect on how new ideas and inspiration intersect with the life and words of Jesus, and do our best to get to where God is guiding us. As Sydney and Elsie and Rylan affirm their faith today and are confirmed, each of us is invited to reflect and reaffirm our own faith together with them. We do that so that as we embark on the journey that lies ahead, we may know that God's grace and love goes with us, and more specifically with you, wherever that leads. Amen. That's this week's message. You don't have to navigate the road ahead alone. You can join with others at All Saints. Visit allsaintsmtka.org for more information. Have a great week.